Welcome Gemini, it's your in-depth monthly horoscope for November 2024 for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. Please see beneath this video to view your year 2025 Zodiac forecast. You can also order your personal forecast for next year now, get the rest of this year free, and also your life roadmap report and 30% off. Please see below for that too. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the month. First of all, we need to be mindful of the two luminaries, the moon and the sun. They're very close together, and later on the first day of November, come into a new moon. That's glorious for resetting your approach around the finer details of life. Because if you do make some refinements, it can have a fundamental impact on your well-being. The sixth house can be about virtue. If you have been burning the midnight oil, perhaps drinking a little bit too much, not quite getting enough exercise, the following month gives you an opportunity to reset. But you don't necessarily have to go about things in a big way. You can make a number of small adjustments. So for example, 5% improvement in the amount of sleep you're getting, 5% the amount of exercise, a 5% improvement in terms of not eating so much ready food or highly processed food and making stuff from scratch, and before you know it, you're actually making quite a significant improvement, which gives you a greater sense of well-being. The sixth house can also be where we like to help others. It can be to do with our work. But let's just take a wider lens on what's going on at the start of the month. As they go into the new moon later on the 1st, and that opportunity is presented, your ruler, Mercury, is also in the sign of Scorpio, but is opposed by Uranus, which is a very electric energy, still continuing in your 12th house. It's going to arrive in your sign next July the 7th for 4 months. Definitely something to look forwards to. But that can create some underlying tension. In fact, so much so that it can feel like almost overpowering. So just be aware, some brittle energy is to the fore at the start of this month. And one of the drivers is going to be around money or values. If your values are very different to other people, there could be a temptation to try to enforce your view, your worldview on them. And that's because Mars is in your sector of everyday values, but it's opposing Pluto in your sector of long-term resources, shared assets, finances, but also very close involvements. So they're forging a T-square back to the moon. So whether it's you who's going to be rather self-critical, someone who's a little bit critical about you, your values could come under scrutiny at the start of this month, and that can create a lot of electric energy. But you know, there is a huge opportunity in November for Geminis, because if we look at the position of Mercury, degree 27, the position of Mars, degree 28, and the position of Neptune, degree 27, they forge a grand water trine. Now, a grand water trine is brilliant for feeling things in a good and flowing and evolving way. It just so happens in terms of the house system, Mars is in 2, everyday money, resources and self-worth. Mercury's in house 6, precision. And Neptune's in house 10, how you interact with the world at large. If you're very focused on what you're trying to do, you're not trying to overextend, you're very clear on your strategy, and also you're trying to project something which is more creative, my word, you could do really well this month. What's not to like? Well, it's just at the start of the month, Venus, the planet of relating, is clashing with Saturn. It's actually forging a really strong opposition with Jupiter in your sign, which could give you a sense of optimism. But Saturn in the 10th house suggests that you could be scrutinized by people publicly in quite a powerful way. And it does suggest that certain relationships if the ins and outs around finances between two people, or there are different values, or one party is a bit pernickety, could create some real tension. So really important as you go into this month to, whilst try to embrace that energy of the new moon in your 6th house and to try to find those improvements, that you don't be too much of a perfectionist. And one of the opportunities comes up very quickly on the 2nd, when Mercury, your ruler, moves into your opposite sign. Now, from a technical viewpoint, Mercury's not at its best in Sagittarius, but I feel for you, it just helps you to take a breath, step back a little bit, and if someone does see something a bit different to you, don't necessarily see it as a personal attack. Also on the 4th, Mars, the planet of drive, passion, assertion, desire, instant gratification, moves into your 3rd house. Now that's very redolent of the core archetype of your sign, quick communication. If you give the proud Leo, the host, the energy to feed into Mars, if you've got ideas that you want to share with people that you really believe in, you can do so with a lot of thrust and conviction right through to the 6th of December, whence Mars goes into its retrograde. But just be aware that despite that opportunity, with Mercury moving into your opposite sign, Mars moving into Leo, which can see a picking up in the pace, Mars and Pluto remain broadly opposite through to the middle of the month, and they come into an exact opposition on the 3rd. And if you really aren't seeing eye to eye with someone, particularly about money, it could become a very fierce debate at the very least. But you know, if you're footloose and fancy free, that's an aspect that could see you find it very difficult to ignore someone's aura, someone's magnetism. And it could be because they are very charismatic in some way, or exude a kind of energy that you just find makes your pulse race quicker. So it's a really interesting energy between Mars and Pluto. You can either put people at different ends of the settee, or it could put them together in a very potentially fiery way, but in a very, very amorous way too. And having Mercury join up with Venus in your 7th house of relating on the 2nd does suggest the desire to connect more sweetly is going to be in the mix. However, Mercury does enter its pre-retrograde shadow on the 7th. Now this is really important. This is the degree that Mercury will retreat to at the very end of its retrograde. So things can slow down. So there could be some cross wires around relationships. That's going to intensify from the 26th, when Mercury actually goes fully into its retrograde, through to the middle of December. So if you do meet someone new from the end of this month through to then, the chance of it being a bit stop-start are greater. Also in week 2 of this month, Mercury squares up with Saturn. If you're needing to speak to someone influential, it's vital that you're not short with them, that you're not impatient, that you don't come across as someone who is a bit too cool. It's important to try to keep the warmth. Venus will help you, but I feel the square between Mercury and Saturn could see you perceived as someone who's very sharp and penetrating in what you say, and perhaps wanting things very much on your own terms. So just be mindful of that. On the 11th, however, Venus glides into the deepest part of your chart. If there is someone that it is really going well with, perhaps sparked and ignited by the Mars-Pluto opposition, it could get hotter still. Then again, you could benefit financially from someone else's success, perhaps, for example, a partner's success. But on the 15th, Saturn ends its retrograde. Saturn has been retracing its steps, and as it's retraced its steps, it's gone from about 17 degrees back to 11. And it just depends where you have influences in your natal chart. But if things have been slow around your professional aspirations, or you've been finding it more difficult to reach people in positions of influence in a way that works for you, haven't quite had the perfect interview or presentation, or your own business has seemed to have just stalled a little bit, things can start to move forwards. But the 15th sees quite a tricky full moon, particularly because in week 3 of this month, the Sun and Uranus are resolutely opposed, and that's threaded through that full moon. So Uranus, the planet of surprises, but also the planet of change, the planet of higher truths, the planet that rules mythically the sky, that in your 12th house of the subconscious goes face to face with the Sun in the most practical part of your situation. So as much as that new moon at the start of the month is urging you to make some adjustments, there could be something that comes up at the heart of this month which isn't quite working out. And maybe at work, for example, someone could be surprisingly critical of you. Someone you're not expecting can turn out to have a bit of an agenda which you weren't aware of. Then again, if you've been keeping some frustration close to your chest around your work, or about a colleague, or about the organisation you work for, you may find it very difficult to keep that to yourself. You may need in some ways to release some frustration. But the 19th does see Pluto return to your sister air sign of Aquarius. We had the first blush 11 weeks in 23 from the end of March, the second blush earlier this year from the 21st of January, Pluto's birthday, through to the 2nd of September. Now we get the third opportunity. So the chances are for you, at some point over those last couple of years, you have engaged with knowledge in some kind of profound way. It could be through publishing, it could be through film, it may be through travel or philosophy or higher education, but all of those themes are going to become much more consistently part of your life future forwards. On the 21st, the Sun moves out of that 6th house of perfection into the 7th house of relation or relating. The 7th house can be where we can clear the air, where we can acknowledge that other people have a right to see things differently to us. But also, the Sun forges a brilliant link to the position of Pluto. You may meet someone at this point of the month who turns out to be very influential in your life. It could be an accountant, it could be a lawyer, it could be a life coach, it could be that you become aware of someone's philosophical teachings, it could be an astrologer. If you're really studying astrology, you find a book that really rings out to you, and that can be a very evocative energy at that point in the month. You may sign up for a course of higher education. The 26th, however, does see, as I mentioned before, your ruler go formally into its retrograde through to the middle of December, doesn't emerge through until the 3rd of January. So just be aware that in the latter part of this year, relationships could be a little bit challenging, especially when Mars goes into its retrograde on the 6th of December in the sign of Leo, and words can get a little confused. However, as this month draws to a close, I feel that you have a chance to think about what your connections to others are. And although Venus has moved on from Sagittarius, has dived deep, that's really in a way wanting you to make sure that who you're connected to is as invested and devoted and cares as much as you do. Now, whether that is an employer, a colleague, a partnership, whether it is in a romantic situation, you want to feel that they're all in. Now that's interesting for you because traditionally you're someone who's like to be a little free, because that gives you the room to pivot into different situations and different people who intrigue you. And there could be some of that towards the end of this year. But if you are someone who's very interested in having some kind of sexual connection, just being really honest, that Mars-Pluto opposition, and then at the end of the month, Venus being in your 8th house, then the energy of the Sun moving into Sagittarius, with Mercury there as well, that could be something you're looking for a meaningful connection in all the different strands of your situation. It's been a real pleasure being with you, Gemini. I hope you have a great November, and please do check out your year 2025 deep dive Zodiac forecast, which you can click on beneath this video.